The sun had long disappeared behind the pale red dunes of Talmar, leaving the land in silence. The village of Nara, a small settlement of strange, tall, and slender aliens, was quiet. The air was dry and heavy. The villagers had not seen rain for many years. Rivers were gone, wells were empty, and the plants struggled to survive. The people walked slowly, carrying jars and small containers, hoping to find some water. The sky above was empty, a vast canvas of orange and purple fading to deep gray. Kara, one of the village scouts, walked along the edge of the outer dunes. She was strong, with bright eyes that always seemed to look far into the distance. She carried a long staff, made of silver metal and polished wood, used to probe the sand for hidden water. She often walked alone in the desert at night. It was quiet there, and she liked the calm. Tonight, however, something was different. A small light flickered on the far horizon. At first, Kara thought it was a fire or a reflection of the sun's last rays. She slowed her steps and squinted. The light was moving. It rose and fell like it was floating. Kara's heart beat faster. She had never seen a moving light like this in the desert before. Carefully, she moved closer. Her boots sank into the soft sand, and the wind brushed across her face. She called softly to herself. What could this be? As she came nearer, Kara saw the shape of a small ship, broken and half buried in the dunes. Smoke rose gently from its top. The hull was scratched and dented, and strange markings covered its sides. Kara had never seen anything like it. She raised her hand to call the village, but then she noticed movement near the ship. A small figure was trying to push itself up from the sand. Kara ran quickly, her staff ready. She reached the ship and saw a human lying on the sand. He was small and fragile-looking. His skin was pale, and his hair was dark and messy. His clothes were torn, and he breathed weakly. Kara knelt beside him. She did not know his language, but she could see he was alive. Carefully, she lifted him onto her back. The human's head rested against her shoulder. She ran back to the village as fast as she could. The wind blew against her face, but she did not stop. When Kara reached Nara, the villagers gathered around. They had never seen a human before. The creature was strange, and its movements were different from theirs. Some stepped back in fear, but Kara held the human gently. He needs water, she said. The words were hers alone, and she knew the villagers might not understand, yet they could see he was weak and needed help. Slowly, they followed Kara into the shelter where they cared for the sick and injured. The shelter was small, but warm. Kara laid the human on a soft mat. The villagers brought jars of water and some dried food. The human stirred and opened his eyes. His gaze was confused and frightened. He looked around at the tall aliens with long limbs and shining eyes. He tried to speak, but no sound came out clearly. Kara poured water into a small bowl and held it to his lips. The human drank slowly, trembling. Easy, easy, Kara whispered. The villagers watched quietly. Some touched their chests as if to show kindness. The human shivered, and tears came to his eyes. He did not know these creatures, but their care gave him hope. Slowly his breathing became steady. Kara stayed by his side, watching the rise and fall of his chest. She thought of her village, how dry and tired it had become. And now a stranger had come to them, someone who might change everything. Over the next few days, the human began to recover. He could sit up, and he looked around the village with wonder. Nara was simple, with houses built from stone and bark. Gardens were small, but some plants still grew despite the dry land. The villagers showed him where to sit and eat. They gave him water when he was thirsty and soft bread when he was hungry. The human, whose name was Ryan, smiled faintly. Though he could not speak their language, he felt safe among them. Ryan listened as Kara and the villagers spoke among themselves. He learned a few words from their sounds and gestures. They understood him with signs and looks. He told them he had been traveling across space when his ship broke. He did not mean to come to Talmar, but he was grateful to be alive. The villagers felt the warmth of his gratitude. Kara often sat beside him, pointing to the sky and the sun, teaching him about Talmar. Ryan watched the sky, remembering Earth where rain had fallen freely. He longed to feel water again on his skin, One day Ryan wandered near the old desert ridges. He examined the wrecked parts of his ship. Pieces of metal and wires lay scattered in the sand. He picked up a small device and held it in his hands. It was strange and delicate. He studied it carefully, thinking of how it could help. The villagers watched from a distance. They did not understand what he was doing, but they saw the determination in his eyes. He worked for hours, bending, fixing, and connecting. The villagers brought him small stones, metal scraps, and tools. Everyone wanted to help. Kara approached him with a smile. "You work hard," she said, in their language. Ryan nodded and smiled faintly. He worked not just for himself, but for them too. He could feel the dryness of Talmar and the pain of its people. If he could find a way to bring water, he would. He remembered the machines from Earth that could control weather. Perhaps he could repair one here. Perhaps he could give them rain. As the sun set on the fourth day, Ryan tested the device. Sparks flew, and a faint hum filled the air. The villagers gathered near the ridges, looking at him with hope and curiosity. The sky above was dark and still, but Ryan felt energy moving through the machine. He adjusted a few wires, pressed some buttons, and waited. The wind shifted slightly. A small cloud appeared on the horizon. The villagers gasped. The cloud grew slowly, swelling with moisture. The wind carried the sound of water falling. Ryan smiled and stepped back. The villagers stared at the sky, their eyes wide. For the first time in many years, rain began to fall on Talmar. At first it was gentle, wetting the sand and stone. The villagers lifted their hands to the sky, feeling the water on their skin. Children ran into the rain, laughing and shouting with joy. Kara laughed too, holding her staff above her head. The dry land drank deeply. Flowers and plants opened as the water touched them. The rivers, dry for years, began to move again. The human traveler Ryan watched quietly. He felt happiness he had not expected. The villagers surrounded him, showing their gratitude in their own way. They did not need words to explain their joy. The rain continued through the night, filling wells, watering fields, and bringing life back to Talmar. Ryan had come alone, but he had given them hope, water, and life. Kara approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. She smiled and nodded. Though they were different in every way, their hearts shared understanding. Ryan had been lonely in the desert, and the villagers had been thirsty and hopeless. Together, they had changed the future of Talmar. The sky had answered the kindness of the human traveler. Life had returned to the land. The next morning, the village was alive with movement. Rivers flowed, gardens flourished, and laughter filled the air. The villagers worked together, cleaning the streets, planting seeds, and repairing homes. Ryan helped as he could, learning their ways, sharing his knowledge, teaching them small tricks from Earth. He had come as a stranger, but he was becoming part of their lives. Kara looked at him and thought of how one small act of courage and care could change everything. Ryan had not only saved himself, but had saved them too. The sky had given them rain, but the human had given them hope. And hope, Kara realized, was stronger than any storm or sun. The villagers celebrated in their simple way, offering gifts of food, cloth, and flowers to Ryan. He accepted them humbly, feeling the warmth of a people who had once been dry and empty. He knew his journey was not over. His ship needed repair, and he would have to leave one day. But for now, he stayed, helping, learning, and sharing the joy of life-giving rain. Talmar was no longer silent. The winds carried the scent of wet earth and growing plants. The rivers sang softly, and the sky reflected the color of new beginnings. And in the middle of it all stood a human traveler who had come alone, and who had changed the land forever. After the rain, Talmar seemed alive in a way it had not been for many years. Rivers shimmered under the sun, and the gardens of Nara were full of bright green shoots. Flowers bloomed in colors the villagers had almost forgotten. The air smelled sweet, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and growing plants. Villagers moved with energy and laughter, their spirits lifted by the gift of water. Kara watched all of this quietly, her eyes shining with pride. She thought of the human traveler, Ryan, whose quiet determination had brought rain to their world. Ryan himself moved slowly through the village, helping wherever he could. He carried buckets of water to the gardens, showing the villagers how to pour it carefully to reach the roots. He repaired small tools that had broken over the dry years, teaching the aliens how to use them efficiently. The villagers watched his work, fascinated by his ideas. Some of them tried to copy his methods, and others offered him food and small gifts. Ryan smiled quietly, happy to be useful. He had not come to Talmar for fame or thanks. He had come simply to survive, and in doing so he had helped others survive as well. One morning, as the sun rose high over the red dunes, Ryan walked toward the edge of the village. He wanted to explore the areas near the rivers that had just begun to flow. Kara followed him. She liked to see him work, and thought it was wise to keep an eye on him. The two walked together, their shadows long on the wet sand. The rivers were wider now, full of water rushing toward the low valleys. Birds and small animals that had been hiding in the dry months began to emerge. It was a sound and sight that filled the hearts of both Ryan and Kara with wonder. Ryan knelt by the riverbank, testing the water with his hands. It was clean and fresh. He thought of Earth, where rivers had always been a source of life. He smiled faintly, feeling the joy of seeing Talmar's rivers return. Kara pointed to a small island of green in the middle of the river. "Food grows there," she said in their simple words. She meant that plants and berries could be gathered from the island. Ryan nodded and began to think. With a little help, the villagers could plant more seeds and make the land even more fertile. He wanted to share his knowledge, and the villagers wanted to learn. For several days, Ryan worked alongside the villagers, teaching them simple ways to carry water, plant seeds, and care for the young crops. He used his small tools to dig channels in the soil, helping the water reach every root. The villagers listened carefully and copied his movements. Children watched with excitement, asking questions through gestures and pointing. Even the elders, who had been slow and tired for many years, took part. They carried water, moved stones, and planted seeds in neat rows. Ryan realized that even small knowledge, when shared, could grow into something powerful. One afternoon, Ryan noticed dark shapes moving near the far dunes. He squinted and saw creatures he had not seen before. They were tall, thin, with long limbs, and their skin was pale gray. Their eyes glowed faintly in the sunlight. They moved slowly, but with purpose. Ryan stood and called to Kara. "Strange creatures," he said. He pointed toward the dunes. Kara frowned. She had heard stories of wandering beings in the desert, but no one had seen them for years. The villagers gathered quietly, watching the distant figures. Ryan studied the creatures. They did not seem hostile at first. They moved carefully, as if searching for something. But Ryan noticed their sharp claws and the way they scanned the land. He felt a small worry. He did not know their intentions. Kara placed her hand on his arm. She understood his concern. She told the villagers to stay calm and observe. "We must see," she said, pointing with her long fingers. The villagers nodded, their faces showing both fear and curiosity. The strange creatures approached closer to the river, pausing to drink and touch the wet ground. Ryan realized they were drawn to the water. The desert had been dry for years, and the sudden rain must have attracted them. Kara and Ryan decided to approach carefully. They moved slowly, keeping their voices low. As they drew nearer, Ryan held up a hand, showing peace. The creatures looked at him with large, glowing eyes. Ryan stepped forward and extended his hand gently. The aliens of Talmar watched with wide eyes. To everyone's surprise, the creatures did not attack. They tilted their heads, sniffed the air, and studied Ryan. Slowly, one of them stepped closer and touched his hand with a small, delicate finger. Ryan smiled. He felt a strange connection, as if they understood him without words. Kara whispered, "They are lonely too." She could sense the creature's need for life and water, much like the villagers had felt. Ryan nodded. He decided to show them the river and the green island. The creatures followed quietly, learning from his movements. Over the next few days, the strange visitors began to interact with the villagers. Ryan taught them how to share space peacefully and find food without harming the crops. Kara and the others showed them the ways of Talmar, pointing to clean water and safe places to rest. Slowly, fear turned into curiosity, and curiosity grew into cooperation. The strange creatures were intelligent and careful, learning quickly from the villagers' simple gestures. Children laughed as they played near the rivers, showing the newcomers how to move in the wet sand. The elders watched, smiling at the unity forming in their village. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryan sat near the repaired machine he had used to call the rain. The strange creatures gathered around him. Kara joined him, carrying a small basket of fresh fruits. The colors of the sunset reflected on their faces. Ryan felt peaceful. He thought of his journey through space, of the loneliness and fear he had faced, and of the kindness he had found on Talmar. He realized that even in the most distant worlds, connection and care could create life and hope. Ryan began to repair more parts of his ship. The humans had machines that could bring water, regulate weather, and help life grow. He hoped to build a device that could help not just Talmar, but other dry worlds in the future. The villagers watched his work with fascination, offering help when they could. Some carried small pieces of metal, while others offered herbs and food. Children were especially curious, asking questions through gestures and simple words. The atmosphere of the village was full of excitement and learning. One day, a small problem arose. One of the rivers began to dry in a far corner of the land. Ryan studied the flow carefully. He realized that the river's path was blocked by fallen stones and sand dunes. He explained to Kara, who gathered a group of villagers. Together, they cleared the path, moving heavy stones and smoothing the sand. Ryan used small tools to dig tiny channels, directing water to the plants. By the end of the day, the river flowed again. The villagers cheered, laughing and shouting joyfully. The strange creatures joined in, splashing water and making playful movements. The sense of community grew stronger with every shared task. Ryan also explored the green island in the middle of the main river. He found wild fruits and herbs growing there. He taught the villagers how to harvest them carefully without damaging the plants. The children loved this, running from tree to tree, picking fruits and sharing them. Even the elders smiled, tasting the sweet flavors they had not experienced in years. Ryan felt proud. He had come to Talmar alone, but now he was part of something bigger. He had brought life not only through water, but through knowledge, cooperation, and kindness. As weeks passed, the village grew more vibrant. Gardens expanded, rivers ran steadily, and new plants began to grow in the desert. The villagers learned from Ryan and shared their own knowledge. They created a stronger bond with the strange creatures, who had once been wandering alone. The animals of Talmar returned, moving through the rivers and fields. Birds sang in the trees, and small mammals scurried across the sand. The land was alive again, full of motion, sound, and color. One morning, Ryan climbed to the highest ridge near the village. He looked at the horizon, where the sun rose over the red dunes and flowing rivers. He thought of Earth, of the stars, and of the journeys that had brought him here. He smiled. His heart was full of hope. The villagers watched from below, sensing his calm and peace. Kara approached and placed her hand on his shoulder. She did not need words. They both understood that this moment was special. A human had come to Talmar, and life had returned. The story of Ryan's arrival spread quickly across the village and beyond. Neighboring settlements heard of the rain, the rivers, and the strange creatures learning to live in peace. Some came to Nara to see the changes, to witness the miracle of life restored. Ryan guided them, showing how to care for the rivers, plants, and animals. The sense of hope and unity spread further than anyone could have imagined. Talmar was changing, and its people were changing too. At night, Ryan often looked at the stars. He thought of the human worlds far away and the adventures still waiting. Yet he knew his place here was important. He had arrived as a traveler, lonely and weak, but he had found purpose. The villagers and strange creatures had found life through his presence. Together, they had grown stronger, smarter, and kinder. Ryan smiled, feeling the quiet pride of a human who had made a difference. The days after the rain became brighter and busier in Nara. Rivers flowed steadily. Plants were lush, and the villagers moved with energy they had not felt in years. Ryan spent each morning teaching the villagers new ways to care for the land. He showed them how to channel water from the river to smaller gardens and how to rotate crops so the soil would stay fertile. Kara often worked beside him, carrying tools and small seeds. Children ran along the paths, helping carry water or planting seeds, laughing as they worked. Even the elders joined, their hands steady and careful as they dug rows for the plants. One afternoon, Ryan noticed dark clouds gathering near the far desert ridges. The clouds were not like the gentle rain clouds that had returned to Talmar. These were thick and heavy, moving fast. Ryan's heart beat faster. He ran to Kara and called her attention. "Storm," he said, pointing at the clouds. Kara frowned and gathered the villagers quickly. They brought tools, stored food, and guided the animals to safer areas. Even the strange gray creatures that had joined them helped. Carrying smaller animals and protecting the children, the storm arrived quickly, with strong winds that bent the trees and rattled the houses. Ryan climbed the ridge to check the rivers. The water was rising fast, and the flow threatened the small gardens and homes near the banks. He shouted to Kara, pointing to the areas at risk. Kara ran to organize villagers, telling them which plants to move and which paths to protect. Together, humans and aliens worked, their hands steady against the pounding rain. The gray creatures lifted small animals to higher ground. The children watched from the shelter, their eyes wide but filled with trust. Ryan had an idea. He ran to his repaired machine, the one that had called the rain. It was small but powerful. He adjusted its settings to reduce the intensity of the storm in the village area. Sparks flew, and a faint hum filled the air. The clouds above began to slow. The wind dropped slightly, and the rain became gentler. The villagers and creatures looked up, amazed at what the human could do. Ryan worked tirelessly, moving the device to higher ground, adjusting small controls and levers. Gradually, the storm weakened over the village, though it continued further away over the desert. By evening, the storm had passed. The rivers were high, but the banks had held. The villagers cheered quietly, hugging each other and the strange creatures. They looked at Ryan with gratitude and admiration. He smiled faintly, tired but happy. He knew that storms were part of life, but with knowledge and cooperation, danger could be reduced. Kara came to him and placed her hand on his shoulder. She did not need words. They both understood the importance of the human traveler to their survival. The following morning, Ryan decided to explore the lands beyond the village. He wanted to see the other rivers, valleys, and small settlements that might have suffered from the long drought. Kara volunteered to go with him. Together, they set out across the desert. The ground was soft from the recent rains, and small plants sprouted in cracks that had been dry for years. Birds returned to the area, singing in the trees. Small animals scurried through the underbrush. Ryan felt a sense of joy. He realized that Talmar was alive in a way it had not been for decades. As they walked, Ryan and Kara came across another settlement. It was smaller than Nara and had not yet received water from the recent rains. The villagers there looked tired and weak. Their wells were dry and their fields were empty. They stared at Ryan and Kara with curiosity and fear. Ryan stepped forward and gestured, showing water from the small bottles he carried. He pointed to the river flowing nearby and then to the channels that could bring water to their fields. The villagers began to understand. Slowly, they helped move stones, dig channels, and plant seeds. Kara guided them with patience and care. Over the next several days, Ryan taught the people of the new village, same methods he had shared with Nara. He showed them how to use small machines to carry water, how to plant seeds carefully, and how to work together with both humans and gray creatures. The villagers learned quickly, inspired by the human traveler who had brought life to Talmar. The gray creatures moved alongside them, protecting the animals and guiding the children. By the end of the week, the fields were green, and the rivers flowed freely into their lands. The villagers celebrated with songs, laughter, and dancing. Ryan and Kara returned to Nara after helping the second village. They were tired but satisfied. Ryan examined his machine and found ways to improve it. He wanted it to be more efficient, so that even distant settlements could receive water when needed. Kara watched him quietly, admiring his focus and determination. She had seen many travelers, but none had changed so much in such a short time. Ryan had arrived alone, weak and uncertain, and now he was a symbol of hope for all the villages of Talmare. One morning, while Ryan worked on the machine, Kara noticed movement in the desert dunes. Strange shadows flickered across the sand. Ryan saw them too. This time, the creatures were different from the gray ones that had joined the village. They were larger, with strong limbs and wide eyes. Their skin was dark, and their movements were swift. Ryan felt a small worry. He did not know if they were dangerous, but he prepared for anything. He ran to Kara, who called the villagers together. Everyone gathered near the machine, ready to defend the village if needed. The new creatures approached the village cautiously. They did not attack immediately but seemed curious. Ryan stepped forward, holding his hands up. He showed them water and pointed to the green fields. Slowly, the creatures began to understand. Ryan led them to the rivers, showing how the water could support life. Kara and the villagers guided them to safe areas and taught them to respect the plants and animals. The gray creatures also helped, moving among the new arrivals and showing them the ways of Talmar. Over time, the new creatures learned quickly. They joined in planting seeds, moving water, and caring for animals. The villages were stronger than ever, united with the help of humans and gray creatures. Children played together, learning the ways of the land from both Ryan and Kara. The elders shared their wisdom, teaching the newcomers which plants were safe and how to preserve water. Life on Talmar became richer and fuller with every passing day. One afternoon, Ryan noticed that some areas of the desert were still dry. He had an idea. He would build a larger machine, one that could reach the distant lands and bring rain to the most arid areas. He gathered the villagers, the gray creatures, and the new arrivals. Together, they collected materials from the desert, including stones, metal scraps, and natural fibers. Ryan worked tirelessly, assembling the device while teaching the villagers the principles of how it would work. Everyone participated, moving pieces, connecting parts, and observing carefully. By the end of several days, the machine was complete. It was taller than any building in Nara, with tubes, levers, and shining panels. Ryan climbed to the top and activated it carefully. The villagers and creatures watched as the sky responded. Clouds gathered slowly, moving across the desert. The first drops of rain fell on the dry land far from the rivers. The machine worked perfectly, spreading life to areas that had not seen water in decades. Villagers cheered, and children ran into the rain, laughing with delight. Ryan smiled faintly, proud of what had been achieved. That evening, Ryan and Kara sat together, watching the sunset. The rivers flowed full, gardens were lush, and the lands beyond the villages were beginning to thrive. The gray creatures and the new arrivals rested near the village, tired but happy. Ryan thought of his journey through space, of the loneliness he had felt, and of the hope he had found on Talmar. He realized that even one human, arriving alone, could bring life, knowledge, connection to a distant world. Kara looked at Ryan and said simply, "You have given us more than water. You have given us life." Ryan nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The sky above reflected the colors of new beginnings, with clouds carrying rain to every corner of the desert. The villagers and creatures celebrated quietly, their hearts full of gratitude. Ryan had come as a traveler, but he had become a part of Talmar itself, shaping its future with his presence. As night fell, the village glowed softly with lanterns and firelight. Rivers shimmered in the moonlight, and the plants swayed gently in the evening breeze. Children lay on the soft ground, listening to the sounds of flowing water and distant animals. The villagers spoke quietly among themselves, planning for the days ahead. Ryan rested near his machine, satisfied and peaceful. He knew there were still challenges ahead, but he also knew that with cooperation, knowledge, and care, the people of Talmar could overcome anything. The days on Talmar had become brighter and more alive than anyone could remember. Rivers flowed with steady strength, Gardens were full of green leaves and flowers, and the villages were connected by a network of small channels carrying water to every corner of the land. The humans, gray creatures, and villagers worked together, sharing knowledge and learning from one another. Ryan moved among them, teaching, fixing, and planning. Yet he could feel a small tension in the air. The desert beyond the rivers had begun to change. Strange sounds sometimes echoed across the dunes, and the clouds gathering there were heavier than usual. One morning, as Ryan walked along the riverbank, he noticed unusual movements in the far desert. Tall shadows appeared near the horizon, moving faster than the gray creatures or the villagers. Ryan called Kara to him. She squinted at the distance and frowned. "We must watch," she said. The villagers began to gather, sensing a possible danger. Even the gray creatures approached cautiously, their glowing eyes scanning the dunes. Ryan felt the need to prepare. He ran to his machine, checking the systems and making sure everything worked perfectly. By midday, the shadows had grown larger. Ryan and Kara could see that the creatures approaching were bigger than any they had seen before. Their limbs were strong and long, and their movements were swift and careful. The villagers whispered among themselves, fear and curiosity mixing together. Ryan stepped forward, raising his hands in peace. The creatures paused, tilting their heads as if trying to understand the humans and the villagers. The gray creatures stood beside Ryan and Kara, showing calm and signaling friendship. Ryan made a decision. He would try to communicate. He gathered some water, small fruits, and herbs, arranging them on a flat stone. He walked toward the approaching creatures slowly. Kara and the villagers followed behind, staying alert but calm. The creatures came closer, observing every movement. Ryan placed the offerings on the sand and stepped back. He raised his hands again and gestured for peace. The creatures touched the fruits carefully and sniffed the water. Slowly, they began to relax, sitting near the offerings. Ryan smiled faintly, realizing that even beings from the unknown could understand kindness. For several days, Ryan and Kara worked to teach the new creatures how to live peacefully among the villages. They showed them where to find water, how to protect the plants, and how to move carefully with the other animals. The villagers helped too, offering guidance and sharing their knowledge. Slowly, the tension melted away. The gray creatures moved among the new arrivals, showing them how to carry animals safely and avoid breaking plants. The children laughed as the newcomers learned to play simple games. And even the elders smiled, watching the cooperation grow. Yet Ryan knew that not all dangers were simple. One afternoon he noticed that one of the rivers was slowing. The water level dropped unexpectedly. He ran to Kara, who had been surveying the fields. Together, they followed the river upstream. They discovered that a large pile of sand and rocks had blocked the river in a narrow canyon. Water was trapped, threatening to flood the villages below if the blockage gave way. Ryan studied the situation carefully. He realized that if they worked together quickly, they could save the river and protect the land. Ryan and Kara returned to the village to organize the villagers and creatures. Everyone moved into action. The gray creatures carried heavy stones, while the villagers dug small channels to direct the water. Ryan used his small tools to loosen the sand carefully. They worked for hours under the hot sun, moving materials with precision and care. Children helped in safe areas, carrying small buckets of water and cheering the workers. Slowly, the river began to flow again. The blocked water was released safely, and the gardens below were protected. The villagers cheered, praising Ryan and Kara for their guidance. That night, Ryan and Kara sat by the river, exhausted but satisfied. The moon reflected in the flowing water, and the plants swayed gently in the evening breeze. "You have done much," Kara said. "Talmar is changing because of you." Ryan smiled. He felt a deep sense of purpose. He had come alone, weak and uncertain, and now he had helped shape the land and the lives of many. Yet he knew there were still challenges ahead. Talmar was alive, but the desert beyond the rivers remained wild and unpredictable. The next morning, Ryan decided to explore further into the desert. He wanted to find the source of the rivers and understand the land more fully. Kara joined him, and together they walked beyond the familiar dunes. The wind carried a faint scent of wet earth, but it also carried whispers of distant storms. Ryan noticed tracks in the sand creatures moving in groups, leaving deep marks behind. He followed them carefully, studying the patterns. Kara pointed out signs of small water pockets hidden in the rocks. Together, they moved cautiously, knowing that knowledge of the land was essential for survival. After several hours, they discovered a hidden canyon. It was deep and narrow, with walls of red rock and patches of green plants growing near small pools of water. Ryan felt a surge of excitement. This canyon could provide water for many more villages if managed carefully. He examined the flow of water and the paths it could take. Kara watched as he sketched maps in the sand, showing how channels could be built to bring life to distant lands. The canyon was a challenge, but also an opportunity. They returned to Nara to gather materials and plan carefully. Over the next week, Ryan organized a large project. Villagers, gray creatures, and the new arrivals all participated. They built channels, dug trenches, and placed small stones to guide water to the distant fields. Ryan used his knowledge of machines to create small pumps that could move water uphill when necessary. The work was exhausting, but the cooperation and laughter made it easier. Children ran between teams, carrying small tools and cheering their friends. Even the elders lent their strength, showing that wisdom and experience were as valuable as speed and power. One evening, after a long day of work, Ryan climbed a ridge to see the progress. The land was transforming. Water flowed through channels into distant fields, creating new gardens and green patches. Villages that had been dry for years were beginning to thrive. The strange creatures moved carefully along the rivers, learning from Ryan and the villagers how to care for the plants and animals. Kara joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. They watched quietly as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ryan felt proud. He realized that one human, arriving alone, could inspire change, cooperation, hope across an entire world. Suddenly, a distant roar echoed through the canyon. Ryan and Kara turned toward the sound. The new creatures froze and the villagers looked worried. A sandstorm was forming far away, moving quickly toward the rivers and villages. Ryan felt a surge of determination. He ran to the machine and checked the controls. He could redirect some water to protect the villages, but it would require careful timing and teamwork. Kara gathered the villagers and creatures, explaining the plan. Everyone moved quickly, preparing barriers, guiding water, securing homes. The sandstorm arrived with strong winds and thick clouds of dust. Visibility dropped, and the air was heavy. Ryan worked tirelessly, adjusting the machine and guiding the water flow. Kara moved among the villagers, ensuring that everyone was safe. The gray creatures and new arrivals helped carry animals, protect children, and shield the fields. For hours, they battled the storm together. Ryan's mind was focused and precise. He calculated the flow of water, adjusted the channels, and coordinated with the villagers. Slowly, the sandstorm lost strength over the villages. Its force diverted safely into open desert areas. By nightfall, the storm had passed. The villages were safe, rivers continued to flow, and gardens were intact. Everyone cheered, exhausted but grateful. Ryan smiled faintly, feeling the relief and pride of having guided so many lives through danger. Kara approached him and said, "You have given Talmar more than water. You have given strength, courage, and hope." Ryan nodded. He knew the journey was far from over, but he felt confident that together, humans, villagers, and creatures could overcome any challenge. The next morning, Talmar was calm and bright. Rivers flowed gently, gardens glowed with green, and the villages were full of life. Children played near the rivers, and elders walked slowly among the fields, smiling at the transformation. Ryan continued his work, repairing machines, teaching new methods, and exploring new areas. Kara stayed by his side, guiding the villagers and creatures. Together, they looked toward the horizon, knowing that even greater challenges and opportunities awaited. Talmar had been changed forever, and the human traveler had become a symbol of hope, courage, and life. The morning on Talmar was bright and calm. Rivers flowed freely, Gardens shimmered with green leaves, and the air smelled sweet and fresh. Villagers moved through the streets with energy and laughter, tending to plants and animals, preparing food and caring for one another. Children ran along the paths, carrying small baskets of fruits and water, their faces shining with joy. Even the gray creatures and the newcomers moved gently through the village, helping wherever needed. Talmar had become alive in ways that no one could have imagined before the human traveler arrived. Ryan walked along the main river. Watching the land he had helped transform, he smiled faintly, remembering the long journey that had brought him here. He had arrived weak and alone, lost in a desert world that seemed empty and hopeless. Now he stood in a thriving land full of life, color, and sound. Kara joined him, carrying a small basket of herbs and fruits. She looked at the flowing river and said, "The land sings now. You have given us more than water. You have given us hope." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. Over the next several days, Ryan worked to strengthen the connections between the villages. He guided the villagers in building small bridges over the rivers, making it easier to move water and resources. He showed them how to repair tools quickly and how to plant crops that could withstand the changing climate. The gray creatures helped by carrying heavy loads and guiding animals, while the newcomers learned to share the work and follow simple rules that kept everyone safe. Children learned quickly, moving between tasks with curiosity and excitement. The villages were alive with cooperation, learning, and laughter. One morning, Ryan noticed something unusual near the far desert ridge. The ground seemed disturbed, and small clouds of dust rose from hidden crevices. He ran to Kara and pointed. She squinted and nodded. "We should investigate," she said. They gathered a small group of villagers and creatures and moved toward the ridge carefully. As they approached, they discovered a hidden valley that had been untouched for years. Large boulders blocked small streams, and the land was dry and cracked. It was a perfect opportunity to bring life to a place that had been forgotten. Ryan studied the valley and smiled. He could see how water could flow through the rocks and reach the dry land below. He explained his plan to Kara and the villagers. They would clear the boulders, dig small channels, and use the water from the rivers to bring life to the valley. Everyone worked together with energy and determination. The gray creatures carried the heaviest stones, while the villagers dug carefully. Ryan used small machines to lift and move rocks that were too heavy for anyone else. Children helped in safe areas, carrying small buckets of water and cheering on the workers. By the end of the week, the valley began to change. Water flowed through the channels, reaching the dry soil. Small plants began to sprout, and the ground softened with moisture. Birds returned to the area, singing from the cliffs and trees. Small animals cautiously explored the streams, drinking and playing in the fresh water. The villagers cheered, amazed at how quickly life could return to a place that had been dry and silent for so long. Ryan watched quietly, feeling proud, but also humble. He had arrived alone, but together they had created something extraordinary. One afternoon, Ryan noticed dark clouds gathering in the sky. He ran to Kara and pointed. "Storm," he said. Kara nodded, gathering the villagers and creatures. They worked quickly, securing homes, protecting animals, and preparing channels for excess water. The storm arrived with strong winds and heavy rain, but this time the villagers were ready. They had learned from past challenges and trusted Ryan's guidance. The gray creatures and newcomers moved carefully, helping everyone stay safe. Ryan climbed the ridge with his small machine, adjusting controls to guide the flow of water and prevent flooding. The storm lasted for several hours, testing the villagers' patience and skill. Water rushed through the channels, trees bent under the wind, and the river swelled. Ryan worked tirelessly, adjusting the flow and guiding the villagers to move barriers when needed. Kara moved among the children and elders, keeping them safe and calm. Slowly, the storm weakened over the villages, its energy diverted safely into the desert. When it passed, the land was wet and alive. Rivers flowed, gardens were intact, and the villagers cheered quietly, proud of their teamwork and the guidance of the human traveler after the storm. Ryan and Kara walked along the riverbanks, examining the land. They noticed that the gardens had grown stronger, and new plants had appeared in areas that had never been cultivated. The villagers and creatures worked together to care for the growth, planting new seeds, repairing tools, and sharing knowledge. Children ran between the gardens, laughing as they helped carry water and small baskets of fruits. Elders gave advice, showing which plants could survive the strong winds and which needed extra care. Talmar was alive in every sense, full of energy, cooperation, and hope. Ryan realized that his time on Talmar had changed him as much as it had changed the land. He had come as a lonely traveler, unsure of his purpose. Now he stood in a world that thrived because of cooperation, kindness, and knowledge. He had shown that even one human could make a difference, but he had also learned that true success came from working with others, learning from them, and sharing knowledge freely. Kara watched him quietly, sensing his thoughts. She knew that Ryan's journey was far from over, but Talmar had become stronger and more vibrant because of his presence. One day, Ryan climbed to the highest ridge overlooking the villages. He looked at the rivers, gardens, and valleys, seeing the land alive and full of motion. The gray creatures and newcomers moved carefully through the fields, helping wherever needed. Villagers worked together, sharing food, water, and guidance. Children ran freely, playing and learning. Ryan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey that had brought him to Talmar, once lonely and uncertain, had created a legacy of hope, cooperation, and life. Kara joined him at the ridge, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You have given us more than water," she said. "You have given life, courage, and a future." Ryan nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He knew that Talmar would continue to grow, thrive, and adapt long after he left. The villages were strong, the land was alive, and the creatures had learned to live in harmony. Talmar had been transformed by one human traveler and the unity of its people. Over the next few days, the villages held a celebration. They decorated the streets with flowers, set up small tables with fruits and herbs, and invited all creatures to join. Children danced and played games. Elders shared stories of the old days and the new. And the gray creatures and newcomers moved gracefully among the villagers. Ryan walked quietly, smiling at the joy around him. He had arrived as a stranger, but he was now part of Talmar itself. The people and creatures had given him friendship, trust, and gratitude. During the celebration, Ryan noticed a small child standing alone near the river. The child looked at the flowing water with wide eyes. Ryan knelt and gestured for the child to come closer. He showed how the water nourished the plants and helped the animals. The child smiled and nodded, understanding through gestures and quiet observation. Ryan felt a sense of hope for the future. Talmar would continue to thrive, and the next generation would learn to care for the land, creatures, and each other. As night fell, the villages glowed softly with lanterns and firelight. Rivers reflected the moon, and the plants swayed gently in the breeze. Ryan and Kara walked among the villagers, sharing small gifts of fruits and herbs. Everyone was calm, happy, and full of gratitude. Ryan looked at the sky, now filled with stars and soft clouds. He realized that the journey of one human traveler had brought life to a distant world, taught lessons of cooperation and knowledge, and inspired hope for generations to come before leaving for his repaired ship. Ryan walked through the main village one last time. He saw children running along the paths, elders smiling, and gray creatures moving peacefully among the villagers. He paused at the river and touched the water, feeling its cool freshness. Kara approached, holding his hand briefly. "You will always be part of Talmar," she said. Ryan smiled. He knew that he had changed the world, and in return, Talmar had changed him. He would carry this experience forever. A reminder that even in the most distant places, life could thrive when hope, kindness, and cooperation were present. Ryan boarded his ship, ready to continue his journey through the stars. As the engines hummed and the ship lifted into the sky, he looked down at Talmar. Rivers sparkled, gardens swayed, and villages moved in harmony. The human traveler who had once been lonely had left a mark that would last for generations. The skies above Talmar reflected life and promise. The people, creatures, and children raised their hands to the rain. Remembering the human who had brought hope, knowledge, and life to their world, Talmar would never be the same again. One human traveler had arrived alone, but he had united creatures, villagers, and children, taught them the power of knowledge and cooperation, and helped them transform a desert into a thriving world. Ryan's legacy would live on in the rivers, the gardens, the laughter of children, and the hearts of every sea.